Well, we're right at about 8, so I thought I'd kind of talk a little bit about Mozart and then play some Mozart. It should be a fairly quick performance. I don't want to call this a lecture recital, but it's a discussion that I will kind of lead and do here. I wanted just to, hopefully you see this here. If you see a link pop up, if you are not part of my email list and you want to subscribe, I put together a little, or if you're a previous member of my email list, I put together a little listening guide, and I hope it popped up there somewhere. Hi, Mary, good to see you. And if you subscribe to my email list, I put together a listening guide about Mozart piano sonatas. And so this is especially if you're, well, there's parts of it for everybody. If you're not so familiar with some of the classical music terminology, and I define some of the key terms that I may use today or I may use in the future, and some key terms just to understand what all this stuff means. And then I talk a little bit about the history of Mozart's piano sonatas and about Mozart himself, just a little bit. And I have some links to recordings of some great Mozart players. So if you want to check that out now or a little later, that might be useful. Great, so the link was there. Good. So I had this idea just a few days ago to play for you tonight, because I was thinking ahead. Well, Wednesday night is Mozart's birthday. He was born January 27th in 1756, and so today is a nice round 265 years since Mozart was born. And Mozart was born in Salzburg. He was a child prodigy, toured Europe, amazing musician, and settled back down as an adult and lived most of his life in Salzburg and then later in Vienna working as a composer. And there's a lot of legends about Mozart. Some of them are true, some of them are not. If you saw the movie Amadeus, Mozart was not poisoned or anything by Salieri. A lot of that is all just made up, but it makes for a great story. But Mozart did die quite young, and somewhat tragically. But he had an amazing output throughout his career. Most important, perhaps, not most important for sure, are his piano sonatas. He wrote 18 piano sonatas over the course of his career, generally within 10 years of his mature career. And they're great. They cover kind of all the different styles that Mozart wrote in. They're not his most important, significant works, but they're representative of his work in general. So it's a little bit of good and bad, I guess, in Mozart's piano sonatas. He was best known for writing opera, and probably that's where he made most of his money. And even today, I think most people, most critics and historians would acknowledge that Mozart's operas are his biggest achievements. And for some people, opera is great and exciting, and I tend to fall into that camp. But for other people, maybe it's not clear exactly what opera is or why it can be great. You just kind of think about a certain style of singing when you think about opera. But I like to think of these Mozart piano sonatas as mini operas without words, of course. I will not sing for you today. But they're mini operas in that there's all these different characters, these different styles, these different melodies that combine and go back and forth, and you can get a sense of drama just by listening to these different melodies and how they interact with each other. So when I play Mozart's music, I don't think about specific characters. I don't think about a specific story. Some people do. For some people, it's really helpful just to have a very specific story in mind. But when I'm playing Mozart's music, I'm thinking more about how alive can I make this particular thing feel? How can I bring this to life? One of the difficulties of Mozart's music is that if you could just play it, what's on the page, you play the notes and the rhythms. He sometimes tells us to play loud or soft. Sometimes he tells us to play staccato, short and detached. Other times he tells us to play legato, smooth and connected. But Mozart, but that's about it. And if you do that, you're playing Mozart correctly because you're playing what Mozart wrote. But it can feel rather dull and boring. The characters don't have much life or dimension. So what I think makes a great Mozart player is someone who seeks to go just beyond what Mozart wrote. There's different ways of playing staccato. There's different ways of playing legato to a degree. There's all kinds of dynamics, loud and soft, and how you go from loud to soft, or vice versa, or do you sit in the middle? Can you get louder and softer without actually getting loud? Can you get louder and softer just as little hills and valleys? All these different things can combine in really unique ways to create characters, to make the characters come to life. So I've spent a lot of my last 2.5 years working on Mozart's piano music. In fact, learning all 18 of Mozart's piano sonatas. It's been a project of mine, and I know them all now. This is the first one I learned for this project. I had learned a couple when I was a student, but I sat down to start learning each Mozart piano sonata in 1 month, and this was the first one I started with. It is Sonata number 1. Mozart wrote it, I believe he was about 20 years old, and it took me a long time to learn to love this particular sonata, and I'd be happy to talk more about that, but I want to play a little bit. So here's what I want to do. A piano sonata is typically in 3 movements. There's usually a fast movement, a slow movement, and then a fast movement. And then there's certain other things regarding form and how a sonata is constructed, which I won't get too much into. But I wanted to play the beginning, what we call the exposition of the 3rd movement. And I want to just kind of tell you where I see the different characters and where I see characters interacting. Again, I don't have specific things in mind, but I have a general idea of this is one thing and it should kind of sound like someone, and then this is another thing and it should sound like someone else, and then these 2 characters are combining and singing together. So I'll just kind of play a little bit and then I'll stop and talk and explain what's going on. So we have a character to start. It starts quietly. And then it does the same thing but loudly. Alright, so then this character decides to go somewhere, and so this character is traveling. And then they meet somebody else. And then the first character has something to say, and the second character responds. Maybe this is the first character again. And then they go off their separate ways. So that's about probably not even a minute's worth of music, but I think there's 2 characters. I think there's a fair bit of action going on there. So that's just a little snippet. This is about a 12-minute piece, and I'd be very curious, if you want to keep count, how many different characters do you hear? Maybe it's a set of characters in the first movement, a different set of characters in the second movement, and another set in the third. Maybe there's only a few characters throughout. But think about that. How much variety do you hear, and how much do you hear these characters interacting? That might help bring this music to life a little bit. One of the there's a saying that Mozart's music is too easy for children and too difficult for adults, and I think about that a lot when I'm playing Mozart. Mozart's, like I said before, you can kind of play what's on the page. In a sense, it's not that difficult. There is a lot of music that has a lot more notes and it's a lot louder and moves a lot faster. That sounds more impressive and looks more impressive and grabs audiences and gets everyone excited. There's that kind of music. Mozart's music isn't quite like that. So that's why we often say it's too easy for children, but it's too hard for adults, because to bring it to life properly, you actually need a lot of very fine finger work and small motor control of all your muscles to get these different nuances that I talked about earlier. It almost like cramps your hand if you're not careful. It's like trying to say a tongue twister. It ties everything up in knots. I tell my students, this is a finger twister passage. Mozart's music is just filled with that. So to find a way to play this, bring the characters to life, and get the technique and make it clear is always a challenge in Mozart, and I'm on my way there, but still searching to a degree. So without further ado, I thought I'll play through the Mozart Piano Sonata, number 1, C major, and 3 movements, fast, slow, fast, and I'll see you on the other side. Mozart. That's how he first entered the realm of writing piano sonatas. He, as I mentioned earlier, he wrote that when he was about 20. He would write 5 more in a row, and even these first 6 piano sonatas, even though they're written right in a row, they're already growing and changing. So very fun. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for listening. Thank you for playing along with my little challenge. So I'll make this link visible again, I think. There we go. So again, if you want to sign up for my email list, there's a little listening guide that you can get when you sign up, and there's links in there to hear some of my favorite Mozart piano players. If you want to try this again, listen to some of their recordings. Hear how they bring these characters to life, and how many characters you hear and how they interact, because every Mozart piano player can potentially do it very differently. And so I'd love to know, if you listen to one of the ones that I suggest, what you think. One of the links I have is myself, and as I learned the Mozart piano sonatas one a month, I did a month-end recording. They're not perfect because I only had a month with each piece, but I'm kind of getting closer with each of them now, so there'll be better recordings in the future. But then there's some other great pianists there too to listen to. So the more you listen, the more you hear. And so if you are interested by this Mozart playing and the idea of the characters, give them a listen and see what you think. I thought I might do this again, maybe in 2 weeks' time, with Sonata number 2, and see how that goes. So if you're available to join me, I forget what the date is. We're into February already. But 2 weeks from tonight, maybe same time. I'd love to see you again. If you know anyone else interested, please let them know. If you like my Facebook page or sign up for my email list, I will have some more thoughts about Mozart, because Mozart's on my mind these days, and so I'm going to be sharing some more of that in the coming days. So check those out if you haven't already. So with that, I'll say goodnight. Thank you so much for coming, and hope to hear from you soon. Take care.